Last night took a L, but tonight I bounce back. Wake up every morning, by the night I count stacks. Knew that ass was real when I hit it, bounce back.
Hello there my Gummy Knights, and today we are going to be getting into another video. This video is actually going to be quite special, as I've been working on the story and script for this video for quite some time now. So today I shall be dipping my feet into the genre of what if. Specifically, what if Krillin trained with King Kai when he was killed by Tambourine? Let's go on and get into this. Go ahead and set up some background for the story. Everything that you know that happens in the events of Dragon Ball is left the same, all the way up until the point to where it's time for the resurrection of Master Roshi, Chaozu, and Krillin. Here is where we start to get our story deviations. A familiar scene plays before us. The wish to revive everyone killed by King Piccolo and his men is underway. This would include Master Roshi and Chaozu. But before the wish can be completed, a telepathic voice reaches out to the group and stops them from completing the wish. This mysterious voice is none other than King Kai himself, although the group does not know that yet. They are rather dumbfounded and confused as to hearing a mysterious voice come from the sky telling them to stop the wish, only because he wishes it to be made with one specific alteration to it: the fact that Krillin shall not be returning to the land of the living. Everyone begins to look scared. They begin to look sad, not even understanding why this is happening or who this is that is telling them this is happening. King Kai assures them that nothing is wrong. In fact, this is a great opportunity for Krillin. He goes on to explain. King Kai informs them that he is a different type of god than what they are used to. In fact, that he is a god that even ranks above Kami. This news shocks the group even more, with Goku clenching his fists in excitement and getting absolutely pumped at the idea that there is a god out there who not only ranks above Kami, but is even possibly more powerful than he is. King Kai then goes on to explain that he has been watching the events unfold on Earth, and wishes to extend a helping hand in aiding our heroes in their endeavors. Now, to side note real quick, I know you guys may think that this isn't necessarily within King Kai's personality. However, I have made an alteration to him, making him far more astute and attentive than what he actually was during the original series, and thus the explanation for his sudden personality change and willingness to help out the rest of the group, despite not doing it before. Now, getting back to the story, King Kai goes on to further explain exactly what the offer was that was made. Thus we are shown a flashback to a scene where Master Roshi, Chaozu, and Krillin first arrived at the checkout station. And we see that Baba, Master Roshi's sister, and King Yama have already been expecting them. Three are told about King Kai's offer, that over the next 3 years, in preparation for not only the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai, but also the return of Piccolo, if they choose to accept, they will be granted special access and permission to go off and train with King Kai, being also allowed to keep their bodies. All three of them look somewhat confused and a little bit scared, and after a brief deliberation, go ahead and give their answer. Master Roshi declines the offer, and the fact that as far as his arc has unfolded up until that point, in truth, he felt that it was time for the next generation to go ahead and continue or take up the fight in general, that he had become too old and that his time had already passed, and thus he declines. Chaozu is also another one who declines, as he basically wishes to return to Tien. It's not necessarily that he's not interested in the offer somewhat, but as far as the connection that Chaozu has with the other gang, or someone who could persuade him to this option, is not really there. He doesn't necessarily have all that motivation to do something along the lines of this. As we can see within the main series, he never really has a motivation to train to begin with. When the situation has ever been truly, absolutely dire, and it required all hands on deck, has he ever even really pushed himself to become much stronger than what he was? So in truth, without said connection, without a solid motivation, he simply just wants to go and be with Tien, and that would require him being alive again, so he declines the offer. Krillin, on the other hand, is actually the only one of the three to accept the offer, mainly due to the fact that Krillin relishes the opportunity to be able to become stronger and perhaps even compete with people like Piccolo and even Goku. But not only that, but also due to a shift in ideology and a shift in mindset. Now this is actually going to become far more important down the line, but as you can see right here are the initial and early inclinations of it. Given the fact that he was indeed murdered, Krillin does not want to be a burden on his friends, but also one to himself. He wishes to strive to become more powerful, not only to be able to protect his friends, but also himself from something like that ever happening again. And with that, he is escorted by Baba to Snake Way, where he begins his track down in order to head to King Kai's planet. King Kai is informed of his decision and makes preparations for his arrival. Now, with King Kai basically explaining all of this to everyone as we transition back over to the previous scene, everyone now having set aside their worry and confusion. King Kai then finishes by establishing the time frame in which Krillin is to be wished back. That, of course, in line with the arc and being as per usual within the 3-year time frame. Krillin will also be wished back at least 2 days before the actual tournament is to begin. And with that being said, King Kai takes his leave, the wish is completed, Master Roshi and Chaozu both indeed come back to life. Now, I'm actually going to sit here and talk about another ripple effect. Due to hearing what they heard, the rest of the fighters who are going to be participating in this tournament are suddenly motivated far more than what they were in the original timeline. Now, especially for somebody like Goku who hears that Krillin is going to be training with somebody like King Kai, who King Kai is of an even higher caliber god than what even Kami is. This motivates people like Goku, Tien, and Yamcha to all themselves even what they did in the original timeline, and we're actually going to get to see some astounding results from this. However, we will not get to see the method of training in which they will be undergoing, because aside from Goku and the Dragon Ball filler, we will not get to see the training methods that people like Tien and Yamcha went through in order to be able to become stronger. However, I will say that it is far more intense than what it was, wherever that training may be, and I will be actually keeping Goku's training pretty much the same, except to a far greater intensity. So he may even get some new techniques from this, you'll just have to wait and see. However, I will be mainly focusing on exactly what happened over the course of the 3 years of training in revolving around Krillin. So for most of the remainder of this video, in terms of the what if of this specific part, I will be focusing on Krillin's development and his training. We transition over to Krillin during his journey on Snake Way. Krillin starts his journey onto Snake Way, and I actually say that it takes a bit longer than Goku. In fact, it takes a full year, as in naturally within the canon story, he was much weaker than Goku to begin with, and it took Goku a half a year to even get there in the first place. So I say it would take Krillin the exact full year, which is still going to leave him 2 full years of training with King Kai, which I think will be very beneficial to him in the long run. However, it does indeed take a year to get there. Now, once Krillin actually makes it there, now I know some people may have a bit of a question mark there as to whether or not Krillin could withstand the gravity. And now I don't think necessarily this is going to be a problem. Even though he is a human and his human biology is naturally much weaker than Goku's and less durable, I still don't think even in this early stages, given his current training, given his current abilities, that he would have that much of a problem. However, it would be far more difficult than it was for Goku, of course given his biology and much weaker power level to this extent. You gotta remember that Goku had already trained 3 years prior to going to meet King Kai, and so he was even stronger than he was before. And this is going to be a much weaker Krillin, and so I actually say it takes a little bit longer. This is actually going to dramatically affect him in the story going forward. However, it's not going to minimize the amount of power increase he will get. Speaking of the power increase, I want to go ahead and point this as now that I'm going to have Krillin naturally get an actual increase. Basically, I kind of halved it from what Goku got. So Goku got a 19 times increase during the canonical run. I figured that I would actually cut that in half and give Krillin half of the same increase that Goku got. This wouldn't make him too strong, nor would it make him too weak. And actually, it sort of really fits with his canonical power increase that he got during the training for the Saiyan Saga. Because guess what? I know a lot of people seem to think that it was only during the Namek Saga where crazy increases happen. But no, you gotta remember, as I just pointed out to you, Goku got basically a 19 times increase during the Saiyan Saga after his training with King Kai. So I don't feel that this is too out of the realm of possibility and keeping in line with the story. Speaking of which, continuing on with the story here, like I said, the trials and tribulations that Goku went through is actually going to be a little bit more difficult for Krillin. And I say that this is going to hinder him in this fact, which keeps him in line with the power increase that I want him to have. And also, he definitely won't be able to master certain other techniques that he's going to be receiving here. Now, as Krillin lands on this planet, of course he finds the gravity to be very intense. He notices to King Kai that he can barely even move or walk, and in fact, Krillin promptly collapsed the minute that he lands on the planet. barely able to stand and weakened to his core, Krillin has to actually get a little bit of assistance from Bubbles the monkey to help him stand on his feet. Now, of course, it won't be too long before Krillin finally adjusts this, but that's going to be the first initial part of his training. Before he does anything in revolving around chasing Bubbles like Goku did in the original, he's going to have to really get himself more used to the gravity. And I think after like at least a couple of weeks of getting used to it, I say that he has still a whole bunch of difficulty really moving around. I say it's going to be around the same level of difficulty that Goku had when he first landed on the planet. Now this puts him into the realm of where his training can really and truly begin, and that starts off with telling King Kai a joke. Now after Krillin easily successfully passes this first initialized test, his next test is to then chase around Bubbles. Now, as the story progresses, you're going to see that this is actually going to be much easier for Krillin, because the whole time he was here, Bubbles was basically already helping him adjust to the gravity, even kind of like doing some slight training on his own. Krillin was sort of kind of like not chasing Bubbles in the same way that Goku did, but however, he was indeed learning from Bubbles in the way to acclimate his body to the much higher increase in gravity. And so, whereas it still takes him a good amount of time, I say a good 3 months before he's finally able to catch Bubbles, he does still indeed succeed. Now on to the next test, where Krillin is tasked with chasing Gregory around in order to hit him with a hammer, the same as Goku. Now I actually feel due to Krillin's previous training with Bubbles, or at least pseudo training to help get himself better acclimated to this, he would actually be far more clever. And given what we know about Krillin's history in terms of his tactical genius, he's oftentimes faced up against stronger opponents, and so he's had to employ more clever tactics in order to be able to overcome said opponents, and so I feel like it would be no different. So whereas the scene wouldn't play out too differently from the way that Goku did it, it would play out differently enough to where you would see an actual more clever tactic being used than what Goku did in order to hit Gregory with the hammer. After that, King Kai feels that Krillin has sufficiently acclimated to the planet's gravity enough, and now it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty, or the brass tacks, where Krillin starts to learn some more good techniques. And I'm actually going to increase the training a little bit here for Krillin and give him another technique. You'll find out what that is later. But starting off with the Kaioken, this is actually pretty much the toughest thing for Krillin. Out of all the techniques that he'll be able to learn here, the Kaioken is the one he struggles with the most, as given once again this is a much weaker version of Krillin, it is hard for him to even maintain a Kaioken times 2, let alone pushing his body to something like a Kaioken times 3. He can barely even maintain the strain, and has constantly passed out. Over the next few weeks, as he's trying to push himself further in order to be able to hone and master on this technique, you see an actual change in Krillin's personality, as in he wants to be able to master this. He starts thinking about everything that he could have lost, the fact that he dies, the trauma that comes from that. And so actually, as we saw in Dragon Ball Super, where Krillin comes face to face with his trauma, whereas it's not as severe as it was then, because at that point he had died multiple times, he had faced multiple opponents who had threatened his life, who had done things to him and harmed him, but here it is still quite enough for him to have a better determination than he has ever had before up until that point. This determination allowing him to push himself even further. Now, whereas he doesn't get anywhere further than a Kaioken times 2 mastery, I do say that that is very efficient enough. I say in terms of acclimating himself and using the bursts to a much more efficient way, Krillin slightly becomes better than Goku in canon. Whereas Goku is more like a tank who fires raw, hard shots, Krillin is more like a knife. He's delicate, he's balanced. However, he still cuts with devastating precision and power. But Krillin doesn't stop there. He keeps pushing himself and keeps going. And by this time, a year and a half has already come and passed, since Krillin had arrived on the planet and had begun his training with King Kai. Which is actually where we get another good change in the story, and where I'm going to be introducing the technique in which I talked about to you guys. Now, it was never shown in canon for King Kai to showcase Goku this technique, but it was indeed said, or at least alluded to the idea that King Kai had this technique until Goku could have taught it to him. That being the instant transmission, or the teleportation technique that Goku learned from the Yardrats. Now, the reason that King Kai comes to this conclusion is he's been seeing the way that Krillin's been honing his craft, and how Krillin is more evasive, he's more tactical, and he's not just a blunt force instrument. Whereas Goku is more heavy and more forceful, Krillin is more balanced and laid back. However, he knows when to strike and he knows exactly where to place a devastating strike in order to do the most effective damage on his opponent. And so King Kai thinks to himself that this technique would be a very big help to Krillin. Not only would it help aid him further along in this story, but would also help aid him in battle significantly. And I say, as the story continues, he may even become more used to using it than even Goku does, given the nature of Krillin's fighting style and all of that. Now, I would say that this technique, out of all the ones that Krillin can learn, is going to be pretty much one of the easiest for him, as I feel like Krillin is a much more spiritualistic person. I feel like he's much more in tune with that side of himself, given his background and all. Considering that he was a monk, I feel that he's more naturally in tune with understanding his ki and how to utilize it in different various ways, including be able to pick out and sense life energy or other key signatures in order for him to be able to teleport to. And thus, Krillin pretty much learns this technique, and not only that, but he also gains a level of mastery over this technique within about 2 months of training with it. Now, this is where we start running into a bit of a problem for Krillin, whereas the last technique on our list that Krillin would have been able to learn from King Kai was indeed the Spirit Bomb or the Genki Dama. Now, I'm going to sit here and point out that Krillin does not actually really learn this technique, or at least in the way that he can utilize it in battle. And I do have a good reason, or at least what I believe to be a good reason for this, given the fact of the time frame in which we're given to work with and how much longer it would have took Krillin to master all of the other techniques. I feel like we were pretty much crunched for time before Krillin's time would have been up for him to be on that planet with King Kai. And also given the nature of how the Genki Dama works in the concentration, whereas I do think he's more spiritually in tune and would be able to track energy, I do not know if he has the ability to gather energy more efficiently than Goku and be able to maintain it. We've seen Goku pretty much able to absorb and utilize energy in some pretty crazy ways too, especially when it comes to gathering energy for things like the Genki Dama. So I feel like Krillin would have been able to learn the basis of it, and he may have even gotten once to practice with the technique, but it would have been anywhere near a level of mastery whatsoever. And in fact, at this point, King Kai tells Krillin that his training is done and that all he has to do is basically wait now until they're ready to revive him. However, this doesn't mean that Krillin is going to sit on his butt for the last few moments of his time here with King Kai. In fact, he spends the last few weeks, and yes, I'm giving him a number of weeks, actually honing on his craft and skill with the techniques he was already able to learn. This gives him a better mastery of how to use the teleportation, which basically he already had a pseudo mastery of before. And even with the Kaioken, this helps him become far more efficient with it. However, again, his limit is basically when he's absolutely pushing himself to the limit is a Kaioken times 3 and nothing more. This does not, however, mean that in the future he would not obtain a higher level of mastery of the technique. However, I think putting him at a times 2 is very efficient enough, and when he's pushing it, again, a times 3. And now, with all the training done and out of the way, all we have next on our list is the revival. Now, once Krillin is revived, rather than actually running down while the snake away, he simply teleports to the checkout station and is on his way back to Earth. Now, within this 2 days, it's going to give him time to get reacquainted with everyone and get some rest after his long and strenuous journey. I think that this is actually very efficient enough to give Krillin at least a good couple of days of rest before the tournament actually happens. That way, he's fully prepared and he's fully ready. And now on the actual day of the tournament, we get to see that Krillin is, out of all the other Z fighters, the most gun-ho to be there. In fact, he shows up before all of them because he's absolutely ready to get into this fight, because Krillin definitely wants to get to test his abilities not only against all of his other friends, but mainly Goku, because he heard that Goku was also going to be training with the god, that being Kami, and so he basically wants to see how far his friend has come. And so when everyone shows up, they kind of actually immediately notice a difference. Bulma or launch, they do notice is a change in demeanor from Krillin. As in, he's far more confident and he's far more boastful and even presentable. And also they can see that he's actually bulked up a little bit in terms of his muscle mass. Now, of course, Krillin's not showing all he got, and you can tell in terms of the dialogue and stuff that is used that Krillin is indeed far more confident than he ever was. Now, of course, Krillin is still not on the same level as someone like Vegeta, where he's extremely prideful and arrogant and super cocky. However, you can tell he has a bit more of a boastfulness to him. such as in a quick conversation when Launch tries to approach Krillin trying to get the gist on what's going on, and he actually kind of flirts with her a little bit and kind of puts her on the back foot. And in fact, he is so charming that he actually makes her blush a little. Now, this doesn't mean that Launch is going to be like Krillin's new girlfriend or anything like that, but I just want to kind of like showcase to you that Krillin is far more of a, let's just say, better version of himself. And this is going to have dramatic effects on the story going forward. Now, of course, running into the other Z fighters actually garners a bit of a different reaction. In fact, the other Z fighters kind of get a bit more chill from Krillin. Not in the sense that they feel threatened by him, but that they easily notice that there is indeed something different. Not only that, but they can also tell it in the way that his ki feels. His ki feels far more calm and far more balanced, but at the same time far more potent. It almost kind of chokes them up a bit. Especially, it is more heavy on characters like Yamcha and even Chaozu, who are definitely getting a bit of a stronger vibe of Krillin's new abilities. However, Krillin is indeed masking himself to such a degree to where they cannot actually tell that he's far stronger than what he appears to be. Leaving the only one left to be Goku, who indeed shows up again like he did in the original. However, Krillin and Goku actually kind of have a bit of a stare down. And this stare down is so intense that Goku actually cocks a smile, and a noticeable bead of sweat actually begins to trickle down his head. This gives everyone a bit of pause. I mean, it was very quick and it was very subtle. However, Tien and even Yamcha were taken aback by this. As in, they never really thought that Goku would have that type of expression, especially towards somebody like Krillin. And the fact that Goku almost seemed kinda nervous. And Krillin, as confident as ever, just kind of gives Goku a cocky smile, and they stare at each other for a little bit, an intense stare. However, rather than ending popping off, Krillin just simply extends a hand to Goku, and Goku extends a hand back to him, and the two old friends finally get to meet and catch up, before everyone heads in to go on with the tournament. Alright, getting back into this story, I actually want to start off this part by showcasing some power levels. That way you guys can see where Krillin, Goku, and the other Z fighters, and even Piccolo stand, not only in conjunction with their original counterparts, but also with each other in this new timeline. So here we go. Starting off with our golden boy Krillin himself, he stands at a staggering power level of 1344, in other words 1344, and that's without using Kaioken, mind you. Followed by Goku with a high power level of 520. Now keep in mind, this is why he's suppressed. On to the next one, who surprisingly ends up being Kami, with a power level of 480. This is due to him not only wanting to increase his own power, but also out of necessity in order to keep up with Goku during training. Rounding us out, we have Piccolo, who had basically the same amount of power he did during canon, which would be around 325, Tien at 290, Yamcha at 240, and finally Chaozu at 180. Now, whereas she's not technically a part of the Z team, I still want to include Chi-Chi, who also did not change from canon and is still at a power level of around 130. And let's be real here, no offense to all the fans of him out there, but Yajirobe, at least in this arc, is kinda irrelevant. Of course, moving on to the tournament itself, I'm going to say everything pretty much stays the same for that first half. Chaozu still fixes the numbers for the match selection, and I would say the only real difference here is that everyone wins their matches easier than they did in canon. Moving right along, we still get the same matches for the quarterfinals here as we did in canon. So Tao versus Tien, which ends up being a total wash in Tien's favor. Him being actually a bit stronger here than he was in canon makes his beatdown of Tao as revenge for Chaozu a bit more brutal than it was originally. Next up, we have Goku versus Chi-Chi, or aka Anonymous. This pretty much still goes as normal too, the only real change being that Goku has an easier time dodging her attacks and knocks her out more quickly than he did in canon. And yes, they do still end up finding out who she is, and Goku's promised her, basically setting up a marriage that will take place after the tournament. And with that out of the way, we move on to the third match of Krillin versus Piccolo, where we finally get a significant change in the story. As two combatants head to the stage, Piccolo couldn't help but think to himself what a waste of time this would be. Although he couldn't quite sense it, he still knew there was something off about this human, yet he just couldn't put his finger on it. But rather than dwell on that, he put the thought out of his head for now, as he was far more focused on having his match with Goku later. But little did he know he was in for the shock of his life. As he and Krillin faced each other in the arena, Krillin was the only one getting into his stance. He noticed that Piccolo was in fact completely off guard, not even remotely taking this fight nor Krillin seriously. Even after the announcer gave the okay to begin, Piccolo still refused to take a defensive position. Krillin inquires,
"Hey, what's the matter? The fight's already started. Are you gonna come at me or what? Or should I make the first move?"
Piccolo was perplexed by this. He paused for a moment before bursting out laughing. "What was that, insect? Are you stupid or something? Damn human. What makes you think I would ever waste my time on the likes of you? Listen here, shorty. The best option for you right now is to give up, you hear? Get out of the ring and go hide in a hole somewhere. Not that it'll do you much good in the long run. It's simple, really. You did adequately to make it this far, but this is where your luck runs out. So go on and get. And make way for the real fighters. My target as of now is Goku, and once I'm done with him, I'll make sure to finish off his little friends too." Piccolo finishes, his arrogance on full display as he crosses his arms, standing proudly in the belief that he's already won this battle with just his words alone. However, the exact opposite happens, as Krillin sighs before retorting,
"Wow, a beautiful speech, really. Guess the apple doesn't fall too far after all. Although, it does get me wondering about something."
And what would that be? Krillin, now sporting a devious smile, continues,
"Oh, I was just wondering what's gonna happen to all that bravado once I've knocked you flat on your ass."
Piccolo gasps, looking shocked. In fact, he erupts in anger, screaming out, "How dare!" But Krillin interrupts before he can finish.
"Let me make this simple for you, Junior. All your posturing and grandsaying doesn't mean a damn thing to me. I had expectations of you too, and I gotta say, I'm disappointed. That being said, I didn't come here to chit-chat about like schoolgirls. I came to fight. Unless your plan was to bore me to death, in which case, it's working."
However, Piccolo, on the other hand, was completely enraged, gritting his teeth hard and clenching his fist so tightly, in fact, that his nails bore into his skin, causing blood to drip from his hand. He could only think to himself, "How dare this disgusting lonely bug that he could mock me like this," before screaming out in pure hatred directly towards Krillin, "Die!" Charging full force towards him, cocking his fist back, charging quite a lot of power into a punch that he was sure would kill the human in one blow, thinking once again to himself that this is what he gets for insulting the king of the demons. But alas, his punch would actually never land, as Krillin easily dodged it, sidestepping and moving fast, too fast for Piccolo to even remotely react to, leaping over his arm and doing a spinning kick, slamming his foot right into Piccolo's cheek, sending him flying hard towards the out of bounds, completely again shocking everyone. Piccolo, on the other hand, was completely blindsided by the kick. In fact, it had actually knocked him out, which was clear as he went flying. But lucky for him, he managed to regain consciousness at the last second and avoid being wrung out. Landing back down into the ring, he immediately falls down to one knee, huffing and puffing quite heavily, as he struggled to catch his breath, grabbing hold of the part of his face where he was kicked, noticing that blood had begun to trickle down his chin. He was shocked, and completely in disbelief that a low-level insect was able not only to overpower him, but injure him as well. Looking at the martial artist, he only saw him smiling, with an expression to say as though, "You're too weak to beat me." This thought angered Piccolo even more. He visibly showed his hatred, as noted by a pronounced vein along his forehead. But eventually he was able to calm himself down, thinking that he was getting too worked up, and that the only reason that he got hit was due to him letting his guard down, having underestimated his opponent. But not to worry, he thought to himself. It won't happen again. Standing there looking notably calmer, he chuckled, saying, "So, human, it seems I misjudged you, but don't get too cocky just because you got a lucky shot. I dropped my guard is all, but I'm through playing games. This time, I'll crush you."
"Oh, really?" Krillin countered. "And by all means, show me what you can do."
"Gladly." Piccolo then removed his weighted clothes, exposing his true identity for all to see, and taking a charging stance as he began to power up, his energy growing as his power began to shake the whole arena, as lightning and thunder roared in the skies. Yet Krillin remained unfazed, only commenting when Piccolo finished that he had great power, and asking him not to waste it. Piccolo smirked, holding out his arm, his hand stretched wide as a large amount of ki swelled up in his palm. "Take this!" he yelled before firing off a demon explosive wave directly at Krillin. But unfortunately for Piccolo, Krillin acted quickly and held out both of his hands, putting up a protective ki barrier, which did indeed work as intended, blocking off the blast, but in turn, it created a large smokescreen, allowing Piccolo to speed behind Krillin in an attempt to attack him, but Krillin saw right through his plan. Sensing him coming behind, he dodged his downward axe chop, then flying into the air as Piccolo gave chase. Eventually, Piccolo was able to catch up, reaching him, and he began to throw out a fury of punches and kicks in rapid succession, a combination. But unfortunately, this was also ineffective against Krillin, as he effortlessly dodged, parried, or blocked all of Piccolo's strikes. Still, Piccolo persisted, continuing to attack him, yet he couldn't lay a finger on him. And despite the rage boiling up inside of him, he did his best to push forward. Though as time began to pass, it was becoming clear that he was getting nowhere. So, backing off of his attack and gaining some distance, he attempts with telekinetic binding, grasping Krillin and freezing him in place. He then charges up another massive ki wave, ignoring the heavy drain it was having on him. Because, simply put, at this point, he wanted to see nothing more than Krillin dead, and thus, he fired this massive blast towards him. But like everything else so far, it too was ineffective, as Krillin broke out of the binding with raw power alone and kicked the blast into the air, deflecting it. Piccolo flew towards him, trying out another punch, but that too missed, as Krillin flew higher and higher, getting above Piccolo. But Piccolo quickly looked upward as to not lose sight of him. However, as soon as he did, Krillin used a solar flare, binding Piccolo, distracting him long enough so that he can return the favor from earlier, coming in fast with a hard-hitting double axe handle straight into Piccolo's back, sending him flying straight into the center of the arena, creating a massive explosion. Krillin landed mere feet away, looking down into the crater that he had made, gazing at the banged up and bruised Piccolo, who stared back at him in anger and fury. Krillin then said, "See, I told you. Flat on your ass. And here I thought you were supposed to be stronger than King Piccolo. So much for revenge, eh, Junior?" Ah, damn you! Piccolo struggled to his feet before leaping out of the crater, although it was clear to tell that he was very injured and running low on stamina.
Calm down there. Look, how about this? If you surrender now, we'll call it here. I mean, your family killed me, I've beaten you, so no hard feelings.
Piccolo stared back at him with anger and disgust in his eyes, not even for a moment believing such BS. Of course, Krillin picked up on this and just continued on.
Look, I'm serious here. This could be a chance for you to start anew. Be something more than a tool of revenge that your father wanted you to be. What do you say?
Piccolo was completely dumbfounded. In fact, not just dumbfounded, he was entirely speechless. He couldn't even believe what was happening today. And being bested, first of all. And not only that, but also now being shown mercy by someone such as this. Someone who he thought beneath him. He screamed out, "No! I will not stand for this, you damn human! I'll make you pay!" Piccolo begins to charge up again, his power flaring as he starts to grow larger, larger, and larger still, getting even bigger than the arena itself. Many people in the crowd began to scream out in terror at the sheer massive size of this monster that they were seeing, including people like Tien and Yamcha, who were basically screaming out from the sidelines for Krillin to get out of there. But then Krillin looked over to them, hearing the concerns they were having for him, and he basically told them to calm down and that it would be okay. Even Goku looked towards them and reassured them, essentially saying that Krillin could handle it. Piccolo, laughing, now bellowed in a thunderous voice, "Tremble in fear, you pathetic worm, for now I am unstoppable. I'll crush you." And then he looked over to Goku. "You're next."
So arrogant,
Krillin began to reply.
And here I thought that you would have learned this lesson already. The bigger they are.
Suddenly in a flash, Krillin vanished from sight, instantly moving faster than anyone could track, leaving Piccolo once again dumbfounded. But within that very same instant, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his stomach. Spitting up copious amounts of blood and bile, Krillin began to become visible again, and could be seen punching Piccolo straight into the gut. Piccolo buckled over, falling down to one knee, holding his abdomen, trying to catch his breath, clearly struggling.
The harder they fall!
Krillin shouted in triumph. Piccolo was heavily exhausted and now barely able to breathe. Still, he wasn't ready to give in just yet. Stretching out one of his arms quickly towards Krillin, hoping that just maybe with him still being at the size, he could use it to his advantage. Reaching out, he opened up his hand, trying to seize Krillin within it. But the young fighter, thinking quickly on his feet, used a quick flash of Kaioken, allowing him to completely avoid Piccolo's grasp. Above him now, he charged up a giant ki disc, letting it hover over his hand, prepared to finish this battle once and for all. This sent Piccolo into a panic. He quickly stretched out the other arm, opening his hand to try and seize Krillin, which he managed to dodge without fail, throwing the disc, screaming out as he did it. It went careening towards Piccolo, leaving him no way to dodge it. But right as it seemed that the disc would take off the Namekian's head, it actually broke into two separate smaller discs that ended up chopping off both of Piccolo's arms. He screamed out, shouting up to the heavens, a guttural scream, as Krillin rushed in, not giving him any opportunity to recuperate, and ended this battle by kicking him in the face and launching him out of the ring. Piccolo returning to his normal size as he fell towards the ground. Krillin lands gracefully back down to the ring, throwing up his fist into the air proclaiming victory as the crowd goes wild, singing his praises and shouting his name. His friends somehow could still be heard the most, standing there in shock and awe as they cheered on their friend. Goku and Kami were also some of the most supportive people, both smiling, truly proud of the fighter. But Krillin, although happy, developed quite a somber expression onto his face, thinking back to a conversation he was having with Piccolo just moments earlier. For he knew it wasn't really Piccolo's fault that he was the way he was, that it was the influence of his father, and that darkness being a part of his nature that corrupted what seemingly could have been quite the upstanding individual. So Krillin was thinking to himself, expressing the idea that maybe if he was just given a chance, things could have turned out differently. So he actually goes over to the unconscious body of Piccolo and ends up restoring his strength, using the method of sharing a portion of his own ki in order to achieve this. Once he woke up, Piccolo was still, of course, immediately hostile and angry, but Krillin then explains the situation and expresses his feelings, basically giving Piccolo some good old-fashioned talk no jutsu. Now don't worry, Piccolo is not going to just be suddenly changing his ways randomly on the spot like that. However, I can say that this will indeed have an effect on him going forward in the future. Now, as far as the tournament goes, there indeed are some changes here, some bigger than others. For instance, the stadium isn't blown up this time around, and Kami actually does end up revealing himself during the competition. As far as the fights themselves, just sub in Krillin for Piccolo. But to basically go over all of them here, Shin vs Yamcha, or i.e. Kami vs Yamcha, is a complete wash, of course, in Shin's favor, although Yamcha does actually do better than he did in canon, being a little bit stronger here. And in fact, the match is mostly focused around Kami actually teaching Yamcha a bit more than he did in canon also. The next being Tien and Goku, which is just another stump. Goku barely even broke a sweat on this one. In fact, he doesn't even have to remove his weighted clothing. Yes, Tien is disappointed, as well as his fans, but he does swear to get stronger so that next time he can come out on top. Now we have Shin vs Krillin, or Kami vs Krillin, which wasn't in a fight at all. In fact, Kami just wanted to thank the young man for his help in dealing with Piccolo, and express how amazed he was at the level of skill that Krillin possessed, bowed to him as a sign of respect. And due to Krillin's advanced ki sense and spiritual awareness, he already knew exactly who this was that was thanking him, but decided not to say anything, instead with a smile returning the bow. Kami then promptly conceded the match after. Lastly, we go to the final match between Krillin and Goku, and of course, I know you guys are all expecting it to be one-sided, but whereas yes, Krillin does boast a raw power advantage, it doesn't mean that it's a guaranteed victory. Goku does have the techniques and Saiyan potential to keep him in the game, using moves and techniques that he has picked up and learned over the course of the last 3 years. In fact, during the last video, I basically mentioned to you guys that I would be introducing new techniques for Goku to be able to utilize here that he would have learned over the last 3 years. Or if he already knew the technique, that he was going to be able to utilize it here and maybe even utilize a perfected version of it. Techniques such as the Solar Flare, the Demon Explosive Wave, and even, follow me on this one, the Thunder Shock Surprise. And for a good portion of the early parts of this fight, the tactics involved with these techniques as implemented by Goku were indeed able to keep Krillin on his toes. Although after a while, as in the same with Piccolo, it was becoming clear that Krillin was indeed winning. Goku, never being known as the type of guy to just give up when the odds are stacked against him, still ends up pulling out all the stops just to try to gain an edge. But nevertheless, he would still have to do something drastic if he even wanted a chance at a potential victory. And that's exactly what he does. Using another solar flare, he manages to catch Krillin off guard. Goku then charges up a super advanced Kamehameha wave. The advanced version of this technique that he used originally in the tournament is actually this time around a key syncing technique. It essentially locks onto the target or individual's key and is able to track them no matter where they go. But of course, like in the original, this still isn't your run-of-the-mill Kamehameha wave. In fact, it is a Super Kamehameha wave, which we do know in the original still boasts quite the high power level. Only this time, it's even stronger, due to Goku's overall power level being much higher than it was in canon. In fact, if I had to rank it, I'd say that this attack would actually come up with a power level around 1290, which in fact, even Krillin, in his base form anyway, would have trouble with. So, as Krillin was outrunning this Kamehameha wave, Goku was planning his secondary attack, and this attack was truly his last resort. Goku was in fact using his own life force and the last reserves of his ki, and powering them up into this last resort attack. And this attack is known as the Ozaru Fist. Now, to kind of put up a bit of a side here, I actually wanted to bring this technique back. Now, technically, I do not believe that this is an official name that has been given to this technique, but you guys basically do know this technique. In fact, it was the same technique that Goku used to finish off Demon King Piccolo. I just essentially had him keep the technique and actually master it and utilize it more, especially for occasions like this where he has to use it as a last resort. And so over the last 3 years, he has trained this and has made it even stronger than ever. In fact, it's even more powerful than the Super Kamehameha wave, the advanced version that he's using against Krillin right now. But you guys will get to see in a moment as to what I mean by that. Once he was prepared and finished off charging up this attack, he was towards Krillin, managing to catch him off guard as Krillin had just finished catching the Kamehameha wave and finally managing to disperse it, although it was a little bit of struggle because again, he was in his base form, only to turn around and be directly hit into the gut with what looked like a giant monkey around Goku's fist. Coughing up blood, he was completely rocked by this attack. But still aiming to win, Krillin grit his teeth and yelled out, "Kaioken times 2! The burst alone of activating that level was sheer force and pressure to push Goku back, giving Krillin a desperate momentary reprieve. Now he ends up using this to his advantage as he charges towards Goku and basically gives him a little bit of a love tap. And with the Kaioken times 2, there is no way Goku is going to even remotely be able to contest this, and he's definitely not getting up. Krillin sends him directly into the ground, knocking him out completely. He lands and is declared the winner. So congratulations to Krillin, he has officially won a tournament. Sometime later after the tournament, everyone meets back up and gives their congratulations. Some of them are still quite in shock that Krillin was as strong as he was. They just kept getting way too hype around him. Of course, kind of picking on him a little bit, especially people like Yamcha, doing the whole self-proclaimed, now Krillin is the strongest in the universe and all of that. Although Krillin is a bit bashful, he's still, kind of like, okay, this is nice. I can accept that. Which is fine. Again, I made Krillin a bit more confident than he would have been originally, so whereas he is still somewhat shy, and of course, because we like that bit of Krillin's personality, he is much more confident and willing to kind of like be a little bit more braggish, if you will, and willing to accept the glory for, his achievements a bit more than he was in canon. However, Goku wasn't really praising him in the same way that people like Yamcha and Tien were. He was too busy trying to beg Krillin, essentially, if he could teach him, certain techniques, like the Kyle or whatever he called it, of which it turns out Krillin was more than happy to oblige. But, unfortunately for him, accepting such a request may put him in a bit of a tough spot, as when he looked back at his other friends, it would seem that Goku would definitely not be alone. I guess we should start calling him Master Krillin, Krillin-sama, Sensei Krillin.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Something along the lines of that. 5 years have now passed since the tournament, and of course over that 5 years, Krillin managed to begin the training with the others in the use of Kaioken, noting that he wasn't as good as a teacher as King Kai, but that he still had enough of a handle on it in order to be able to teach everyone. Goku of course being the quickest to pick up on it, managing to actually reach a Kaioken times 3, with Tien being the next closest, able to access it and eventually reach up to around a times 2. albeit with some extreme amount of effort. Yamcha, on the other hand, was indeed able to access it, but really nothing more than that. He couldn't push it to any significant degree as much as the others. However, his strength still vastly increased overall during the course of the training. In fact, even Krillin was able to expand on his limits as well. Although not as much as he would like, he still ended up getting to be able to use a round of ×4 when it comes to using Kaioken. However, pushing for anything more than that is still quite a large strain on him. Overall, I'd say, over the course of the time skip, they did indeed increase greater than what they did in canon, everyone being around 2.5 times stronger than what they were after the 5 years. But still, like in canon, due to external factors, and given the fact that it was indeed peace times, this means that everyone was still not able to get as strong as they could have been. Krillin did also offer to teach some other techniques such as the intertransmission, but mainly due to the lack of time, being the fact that Goku was now starting a family, and Yamcha was actually more focused on his training with Kami. Tien was pretty much the only one who stuck around long enough to be able to start to learn the basics. Although he still really couldn't use it, he was able to pick up on how the technique operate and what it would take in order to be able to use it successfully. Now, as we all know, this peacetime would not last, as Raditz would arrive on the planet in search of Goku. When he comes down, he picks up on several high power levels using his scouter. Raditz is in shock, baffled really. He couldn't believe the high readings that he was seeing, the strongest of which being at a power level of 800. Still, Raditz wasn't too worried, although it did catch him by surprise. He noticed that one of these high power levels, a power level of 650, was off by itself. Although he couldn't be sure, he decided to check that one out first, thinking that the other high power levels off in the distance would be too much of a hassle without checking it out first. Of course, he wanted to be cautious in this scenario. Besides, this person could have ended up being Kakarot, in which case, lucky him. He would still end up coming face to face with Piccolo, and nothing really changes here. I mean, yes, Piccolo is stronger than he was in canon, but not nearly enough to impact the outcome of this exchange. But let's just say, and as a way to show a bit of favoritism to Piccolo, that Raditz ends up knocking him out here, as he recognizes his power and the fact that Piccolo's attacks would have been slightly more challenging than they were in canon. Still, he overcomes him and heads off, his nerves being somewhat calmed, although he still approached the other power levels with caution. Meanwhile, at Kame House, everyone is meeting up again after some time has passed. Not as much as in canon, as most of them trained together over the time skip. So it's only been about a year. Goku, still like in canon, does show up with Gohan, although no one is really shocked to see him, more so surprised to see how much he's grown. And a bit of a side note here, due to certain changes in the events, I actually had Gohan being born a year later than what he was originally, as Goku's training took more of his time from doing a dirty spanky with Chi-Chi. So instead, in this timeline, Gohan is 4 instead of 5. Now back to the story. While everyone is hanging out and having a good time reconnecting, they suddenly get a sharp feeling, as they feel a huge ki spike approaching. This puts everyone on alert, with Goku, Krillin, and Yamcha, yes he is here too, all bolting outside, waiting to meet who it was that was landing. Raditz touching down, proclaiming, "Ah yes, well if it isn't my little brother. Hello, Kakarot." This completely floors the rest of the group, as none of them even knew that Goku even had a brother. But seeing this slightly resembling appearance, as well as the tail, also helps confirm what he was telling them. Raditz went on to drop even more truth bombs, including things like the fact that Goku was an alien, and that he came from a dead race of super warriors. Once his story finished, Raditz even offered Goku a chance to join him in exterminating everyone on the planet so that it could be sold. Of course, Goku firmly declines this, Raditz saying, "Pity that. Guess I have to kill everyone on my own, destroying you in the process." "Over my dead body," Krillin retorts. Raditz then smirked, a sinister grin, as he whipped out his tail towards Krillin, Yamcha screaming in the background for his friend to watch out. However, Krillin was undeterred. In fact, he easily was able to catch Raditz's tail, Raditz's body going limp, as he himself was shocked by Krillin's ability to be able to do that. Krillin, while gripping the tail firmly, pulled Raditz in, raising him up over his head as he began to spin him. He spun him round and round and round, eventually tossing him outward, making Raditz skip over the ocean as though he were a pebble. Raditz eventually was indeed able to stop himself, completely baffled at the strength of this human. After all, when he checked the scouter, he was only able to read a power of Not only has his power level jumped up from the reading that Raditz had before, but in fact his power level was now over 2,000. Raditz was sweating bullets. He was scared out of his mind. knowing now that he was completely out of his depths. But before he could have time to contemplate his mistake, Krillin was already behind him, blitzing him, and the fight begun out, though it became rather clear as Raditz began to get pummeled over and over. No matter what he tried, he couldn't even remotely land a hit on Krillin, that the human he thought previously weaker than him was easily able to overcome him, not only in strength, speed, and power, but also in skill and technique, and that there was absolutely nothing he could do to prevent him from remotely killing him. Raditz, desperate, tried to employ a quick strategy. Seeing an opening given the fact that there was a child there, he aimed to take the child hostage and, using him as leverage, plan an escape, so that way he can get out of the situation. So after getting hit by Krillin back down towards the beach, he summons up his power and does a Saturday Crush, blindsiding everyone, as not only were some of them blown back by the attack itself, but also that there was a massive amount of dust and stuff everywhere, covering the field of vision. This gave Raditz the chance he needed to sit there and rush in at full speed, heading towards Gohan in order to grab him. Goku, however, was able to pick up on this sense, sensing it at the last second, stepping in, but due to the fact that he was completely suppressed, and even at his full power he would still need a Kaioken in order to be able to truly stop Raditz, he was completely outclassed and ended up getting sucker punched, knocked away to the ground, unable to do anything as his son was about to get grabbed. As Raditz stretched out his hand in order to grab Gohan, suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his chest, and in that very same moment he knew that something was wrong, as the top part of his body slid from the lower half and fell to the ground. Turns out, although Krillin was caught off guard at first, he quickly was able to regain his bearings, and using a Kienzan, slice Raditz clean in two. Raditz couldn't help but think in his final moments that this was completely impossible, that he had never been prepared for anything like this. However, still, he couldn't help but start chuckling aloud, given the fact that he was under the impression that he would be avenged, as he informed the group that they may have beaten him, but that two of his comrades were on their way to Earth as we speak, and that they would be there in about a year, admitting that they were several times stronger than him, and that no matter what fancy tricks or no matter how skilled that the Z fighters were, that they would never be able to stand up to those two. He then coughed up some blood before passing on. Damning the world, Goku slammed his fist into the ground, although he was less angry at the outcome of the battle and more so angry at himself, as it was due to his failure to stay on guard that his son was almost captured, and who knows, something worse could have ended up happening. But if that wasn't bad enough, the group was contemplating what to do now that two more Saiyans were going to show up in about a year, given the fact that Raditz was still quite powerful. Even if Krillin was able to defeat him, he was the only one out of the group who could even remotely have stood up to him without Goku using something along the lines of Kaioken. Not necessarily wanting to just rely on such power-ups or one person, the group opted to the idea that they would have to become even stronger than what they were now, if they even hoped to stand a chance. As whether or not Raditz was telling the truth, the group definitely did not want to take any chances. No matter how confident they may have been in their skills, there was always a chance that these Saiyans could have astronomical levels of power, or techniques, or any number of skills at their disposal that could lead them to a victory over the rest of the team. Then maybe perhaps I can be of some assistance. As suddenly the group heard a familiar voice, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Piccolo. Everyone in the group was shocked, and Krillin asked him what he was doing there. Well, you see, I met this guy earlier. Not only was he strong, but he was powerful enough to even take me out. It only took a single blow. I'm ashamed to admit it, but on my own it doesn't seem like I'll be getting any stronger. And as much as I despise you and can't wait to kill you especially, Krillin, it seems I have no choice in the matter here. Besides, I overheard the situation, and if these Saiyans turn out to be as strong as he said they were, then I damn sure won't have a problem limiting my power. After all, if they destroy everything, what will be left for me to rule? I can't believe I'm saying this, but allow me to join you. Moments after the defeat of Raditz, we find the group sitting in Kame's house trying to devise a strategy as to what to do in order to be able to get stronger in order to meet the coming threat. Yamcha ended up chiming in, however, stating, The idea that with Krillin's strength levels and his ability, including techniques like the Kaioken, that they probably wouldn't even need to train all that hard because he could easily just be able to defeat the oncoming threat, seeing how easily he was able to beat Raditz. However, Krillin immediately shoots down that idea, not only because of what we talked about last time, how they shouldn't just be solely relying on a singular person or any one technique, but given the fact that, again, we do not know the strength levels of these Saiyans coming. If Raditz was indeed so inclined to mention their power level, then to some degree we should be able to take him at his word on that, promoting the idea that they are at a significantly stronger level than he was. Because after all, it should be taken into consideration that even though Raditz was no match for Krillin, he was still more than the match for the rest of the cast that was there, including to not only be able to take down Piccolo, but even their second strongest in Goku. This of course put the idea of just solely relying on Krillin immediately within the trash can, as it was nothing more than a fool's dream to just assume that he'd be strong enough to take on any threat because of how strong he was currently. However, then in that moment, an idea was sparked into Krillin's head, that maybe it was true that they couldn't just solely rely on him, but however, maybe they could indeed rely on the teachings of his former master, the one who made him so strong in the first place. He suggested to the group that maybe he could take someone up there to King Kai, along with himself, in order to be able to train to not only further hone the skills and stuff that they already learned from Krillin, but even maybe master a couple of new techniques, explaining to the group how invaluable the training was to him in order to be able to put him to the level that he is at now, including even describing some of the properties of the planet, such as the fact that it had 10 times the gravity of Earth, thus meaning that you can get significantly stronger in a short amount of time. This piques the interest of both Goku and Bulma. Bulma will find out later as to why it piqued her interest, but for Goku, not only hearing the prospects that he can get significantly stronger through this method of training, but also because he really indeed wanted to meet the man who taught Krillin everything that he knows. Not only in acknowledging the benefit of helping him surpass the Saiyans, and also furthering himself and taking those steps in his own evolution in order to increase himself for his own personal self-interest. After all, Goku still has the mindset of wanting to be the strongest, or also wanting to further increase himself, so that way maybe one day he could be able to attain such a goal. Suddenly the group hears two voices speak simultaneously within their heads. One they figure out is King Kai, and the other one they notice to be Kami. Rather than speaking over each other, King Kai is allowed to go first, basically expressing to the idea that he has been listening in, and that he sees that Krillin's idea is actually not a bad one, and that he would be more than happy to take another student under his wing, and how beneficial it could be to them, in the upcoming battle with the Saiyans. Also pointing out as well that Goku would be a great student to learn under him, given his biology and potential, further expressing the idea that Krillin's training had not yet been complete, as there was a specific technique that he wanted to be able to teach him before he left but never got the chance to. This time around, he thinks that he's ready, and not only that, but he's also strong enough in order to be able to learn it and even perfect it, maybe even surpass him with the ability in using the technique. This also goes for Goku as well. After King Kai was finished, Kami then spoke up, also offering the group a chance in order to be able to enhance their abilities, with him on the lookout, going on to further mention that there was even a special room that the group would be able to train in, which not only would advance their progress in training, but that they can get the most significant amount of training in the shortest amount of time, being that one day out here was a year inside of that special room. Of course, most of you know that I'm talking about the Room of Spirit and Time, or the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. Kami even pointed out that people like Tien and Yajirobe had already been there on the lookout. After getting the lowdown on the situation from Kami, they decided to take that path in order to be able to train with him, and potentially even use this room in order to be able to help advance their skills and hone their existing abilities. Now, to put a bit of a side note in here before we continue on, I know you guys are going to be wondering, what about Gohan in all of this? Well, as you can see, the timeline is significantly different from where it was originally, and I'm actually not going to be including Gohan within this, in particular within the Saiyan fight. Whereas it is true that Goku has somewhat started training him a bit more in martial arts, Goku in this timeline, I've actually changed up his character a bit more to be a bit more cautious and a bit more of a kind of like family type man. As far as I do accept the idea that he was that originally, it is pretty much pointed out to the idea that he isn't normally this caring when it comes to the affairs of his family. So given that, I decided to go ahead and let Gohan sit out on this one. especially with the whole idea of what happened in the last part where Goku was defeated by Raditz, and then, you know, he got to see the effects of what could have happened if he hadn't been strong enough in order to be able to stop Raditz. So he's a bit more protective of Gohan in this one, and so we'll elect to have him sit out. So Gohan will most likely either stay here at Kame House and Chi-Chi will just come over here, or, you know, he'll be staying with Chi-Chi, but most likely he'll be staying at Kame House because at least here they have somebody like Master Roshi. I mean, not that that necessarily offers that much protection, but it's better than nothing. I'm not going to sit here and delve too much into it, but, you know, the whole idea is that Gohan will be staying out this time, but that doesn't mean he's going to be out of this series in its entirety. Trust me, Gohan will get his chance to shine, and he will be more involved in the series in later parts. With that being said, let's continue on. With Krillin and Goku deciding on where they wanted to go, and people like Yamcha having a good idea, the only people pressed for a choice as to where they would go were people like Piccolo, as he did not want to go and train with Goku or Krillin, again, his two sworn enemies, and given his tumultuous history with Kami, that didn't really seem like it to be an option either. But in the end, swallowing his pride, Piccolo decided that he would go and train on the lookout with Kami instead of going with Goku and Krillin, as he felt that that was the better option. Although there was still a lot of tension within the room, Yamcha actually took the initiative and stepped up, going over to Piccolo and offering out a hand to him, exclaiming the idea that he would be willing to even forgo the path that he wanted to choose in order to basically give him someone that he can basically train with, as to say, trying to lighten up the air in there. Piccolo, of course, really cared, but still decided to begrudgingly, you know, accept his hand. And with that, everyone's path was decided. Goku and Krillin would go and train with King Kai, and Piccolo and Yamcha would join the others on Kami's lookout. Now, I won't necessarily go into detail on how everything is exactly different from the way it was originally, as in the original we didn't really get to see a lot of the training in which they did, and as far as like when it comes to Piccolo and Gohan, and even with the other Z fighters, and even with Goku in some aspects, a lot of that training was done in filler episodes or filler, so that's pretty much all we have to go for on this one. Although things will be different, as I am going to be indeed using the Highball Time Chamber. Now, basically, it was indeed explained to them, you know, about how it works and things of that nature. And even Yamcha said that during his training, he was potentially going to go in there in the first place. But now this time, he actually is going to go in there. He will be going in with Piccolo, and Tien will be going in with Yajirobe and also with Chaozu. Now, given the whole thing with food, it doesn't necessarily, because it isn't necessarily said that you can't go in there with multiple people or more than 2 people. It just really talks about a whole food thing, and that was like kind of like a big problem with Saiyans, considering how much that they eat. So going in there with multiple Saiyans would probably have been the most optimal situation. But I don't actually see Chaozu ever really eat that much, so I don't think he'll be necessarily too much of a problem. I think Yajirobe would be more so a problem with food, but I think that Tien and Chaozu probably eat so little that it won't necessarily matter all too much. So the 3 of them will be going in, and then you'll have Piccolo and Yamcha. And yes, I will say that Piccolo starts to change, not as much as he did with Gohan, because even though that Yamcha's nature is a bit more gentle and jovialistic, hence my failed attempt at kind of like joking with Piccolo earlier, he still isn't anywhere near as kind and as gentle as Gohan. So Piccolo will kind of like change, but expect him to be still somewhat more aggressive and still a little bit more distrusting than he was in the original. However, there will be a significant change to him in that regards. And as far as Krillin and Goku goes, pretty much the same thing. It's essentially going to be what happened on King Kai's planet, except pretty much with all the steps completed, and the 2 really saw more or less honing in on each other's skills and focusing on the techniques and stuff that they can learn, including Goku. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now stuff, techniques that matter, including Goku mastering the instant transmission. I know it's kind of a bit of a point of contention during the last part, but this time he actually does have the time and ability in order to be able to learn it. So I'm going to go ahead and just have him learn it. Maybe not be as good as Krillin, but I don't think it really matters for our purposes here. And Krillin will indeed learn the Spirit Bomb, as well as Goku kind of like learning the Spirit Bomb as well. So pretty much 2 people who know the Spirit Bomb and know how to use it and things of that nature. If I were to say who gets it quicker and who has a better use or control of it, I would probably go ahead and give that to Krillin. Again, because, you know, he would be better trained than Goku, especially in using the techniques. He'll already be steps ahead of him in terms of, you know, application and knowing how a lot of these techniques stuff works that, you know, King Kai is going to be teaching. Now, another significant change is that this time around, Goku and Krillin, due to the fact that they both have instant transmission, even if Krillin was the only one who still had instant transmission, they would still get there on time. They would still be able to get there on time regardless of anything else. So that means that when the Saiyans arrive in a year, everyone's going to be able to show up and they're going to be there on time and they're going to be waiting for the Saiyans in order to be able to combat them. A year has now gone by and it is time for the arrival of the Saiyans. As two space pods crash land on Earth, the Z-Fighters are immediately alerted to the presence of two powerful warriors as they can sense. Not only that, but when Nappa uses his technique, the amount of life that was lost was instantly able to be felt. Quickly getting into action, both Goku and Krillin arrive on Earth, gathering up the rest of the Z-Fighters quickly and moving the battle to an empty space within a wasteland surrounded by mountains. Now, although they knew that Raditz didn't have the ability in order to be able to sense ki or power, they do not know if the other Saiyans are capable of this. But even if they are, they know they have those devices that are capable of picking up on power levels. And so to avoid any more loss of life, each member of the group raises their power level to a significant level. Not enough to show off exactly what they're truly capable of, but just enough in order to be able to register on the scouter so that way the two Saiyans know exactly where their location is. This causes Vegeta and Nappa to immediately be alerted to the location to where they immediately fly over there. Getting there in a matter of moments, they appear in the sky as the group looks up, noticing them. They then land down. Now I'm going to be putting the power levels up on the screen here just to show how everyone compares to each other. And I can't thank Kami enough that we haven't reached the point to where all of these things are relevant, because this is actually one of the most fun aspects about doing a series like this, where I get to kind of show you guys just exactly how strong everyone is. And big numbers equals big gains, so that's a fun thing for me as well. Besides that, given the fact of everyone's significant growth from the strongest all the way to the weakest, I definitely think it was worth showcasing to everyone just exactly how far all of our Z-Fighters have come in the last year. Now, given the previous reading the two picked up on the Scouters when they first arrived, they are completely underestimating the group here, given the fact that pretty much most of the power levels only raked up within the hundreds, with the highest being around 2,000, which given that he was here this time around, they assumed was coming from Goku. After all, even though Raditz pointed out a mysterious fighter, he never gave any clear specifications as to who it was that he was fighting that had that high power level that he was fighting against last time. However, just as a precaution, given the fact that even a battle power level of 2,000 would still be stronger than your average Cyberman, Nappa this time around, as ordered by Vegeta, plants more than he did originally. But not that much more, only going up by 2, so the total goes from 5 to 7. Now before Nappa can let them loose on the Z-Fighters, Vegeta does indeed extend a hand out to Goku, offering him to come and join them, giving him one last chance to join them in not only conquering this planet, but to help them achieve their ultimate goal, which is why they're here, because they need the Dragon Balls. Vegeta aiming to use the Dragon Balls to make them all immortal. But before he can continue, Goku stops him right there, and then promptly refuses, telling him that if he did not want to end up like Raditz, that he should hurry up and get off this planet. Of course, Vegeta laughs out loud, not really taking his threat to heart, feeling that there was no way in hell that Kakarot or the rest of the group would be able to even defeat Nappa, let alone him, going on and granting Nappa freedom to release the Cybermen. Of course, he gives the order and the Cybermen immediately charge. The group readies themselves for battle, but then Piccolo steps in front of all of them, saying, "What a joke. Leave these small fry to me. I'll take care of this." Nappa, of course, then laughs out loudly. "Ha ha ha! Did you hear that, Vegeta? The Namekian thinks he can take them on all by himself. He must be delusional." Piccolo is taken aback by that, saying, "Namekian?" as he's surprised to hear that name. But unfortunately for him, he had no time to dwell on it, as the Cybermen were getting ready to gang up on him. But in one quick explosive wave, Piccolo immediately blows all of them back. And before they even had time to recover, he swiftly moves, dispatching of each of the Cybermen in a matter of seconds, not taking any time at all. "What was that you said about me, Baldy? Delusional. Looks like you're the only one here who fits that description." "Why, you?" "Calm down, Nappa. He's just trying to rile you up. Don't fall into his game. I have to admit that was rather impressive. But don't get cocky because you took down a bunch of weaklings. Go on, Nappa. Why don't you give him a taste of what true power is?" Nappa is more than happy to oblige at this request. Stepping up, he begins charging up, his energy raging as the sky darkens and the earth begins to shake around them. Whereas some of the Z-Fighters are actually taken aback by the level of power being on display, there's a select few who aren't even phased at all. Piccolo smiling and just readying himself for the fight to come. Nappa charged towards Piccolo, suddenly a blur past Piccolo in blinding speeds, catching Nappa's fist. This shocked the entire group, as it was none other than Yamcha. Nappa couldn't even believe, he couldn't even fathom that this joke of a looking character was able to stop him, almost seemingly with relative ease. Although that wasn't necessarily the case on Yamcha's end, it did take a lot of power in order to be able to stop him, as seen before given the fact that their powers are very relatively close to each other, with Yamcha only being slightly stronger. Nevertheless, Yamcha was confident enough that he'd be able to take on Nappa, telling Piccolo to step back as he gave him a thumbs up to confirm this. Piccolo with a slight smirk obliged his wishes and stepped back. Of course, Nappa laughed and began to mock Yamcha, reprimanding him for such a foolish move, saying that he and the rest of the gang should have came at him all at once if they even wanted to stand a remote of a chance. But Yamcha wouldn't cave under his taunting, simply smiling as he cracked his knuckles, getting into his fighting stance, beckoning Nappa to come at him with everything that he's got. Nappa doesn't even hesitate, charging at him with another attack, throwing his fist back before launching a powerful punch at him. But again, Yamcha catches his punch. The two ended up going back and forth, trading blow after blow, and neither one of them seemed to be giving way. Although it was clear that Yamcha had better skill and technique, it was still unclear as to who would be able to come out on top. Given the discrepancy within their power levels, it wasn't necessarily enough in order to give Yamcha a clear victory. However, it was clear that he had the edge. This ended up aggravating not only Nappa, but also Vegeta, as neither of them could believe that this Earthling was powerful enough to take on Nappa in the way that he was, seemingly able to overcome him. Of course, Nappa was the one who got the angriest, starting to lose his cool, and in fact, this only made his attacks more sloppy, and didn't help him the slightest. Eventually, Yamcha started to get more and more hits against him, including landing a devastating Wolfang Fist and even a Soki-Dan on him. Nappa at this point had completely lost his nerve, shouting out to the heavens about how much he would kill Yamcha. But before he could rush back in foolishly, Vegeta stopped, screaming at him, telling him to just calm down and use his head. This of course immediately stopped Nappa, as he recognized not only the words that Vegeta was saying, but also, given the fact that he was afraid of Vegeta, he elected himself to calm down and began to think it through. However, he still couldn't devise a strategy that he thought would give him an edge or victory, so then he decided to go ahead and use cheap tactics and aim an XD bomber at the rest of the group down below, catching Yamcha completely off guard, as he thought he would have been aiming the attack towards him. As soon as the attack landed, there was indeed a huge explosion, but by the time the smoke clears, none of the Z fighters down below had even had a scratch on them, as what became visible was that there was an energy barrier around the entirety of the group, set up by Krillin, who understood the tactic very well, and definitely wouldn't be caught off guard by some cheap trick like that. Nappa's ploy failed, only seemingly to anger Yamcha, as he burst into a Kaioken ×2 and immediately blasted towards Nappa, instantly slamming a huge punch in his face and knocking him down. This virtually took Nappa out of the fight immediately, as he was almost rendered unconscious by just the mere force of the blow. Struggling to collect himself, let alone even stand up, he looked over towards Vegeta, saying, Vegeta, what does the scouter say about its power level? It's over 8,000. What? 8,000? That's impossible. It can't be. That's what you guys get for underestimating us, Yamcha shouted from above, as he landed back down on the ground. Did you honestly believe that we wouldn't get any stronger? That we weren't going to be prepared in order to take you on? Keep dreaming. Nappa then struggles to his feet, barely able to stand, completely and utterly in shock, completely baffled, sweating bullets. But still, this only seeks to anger him even more, as he prepares for another attack against Yamcha, though Vegeta shouts to him to stand down. At this point, it was no use and that he should back off, electing to step up himself. And this time, Nappa actually does. Unlike in the original, where he sought to go and attack Krillin and Gohan, where Goku ended up paralyzing him and Vegeta ends up killing him, this time he actually backs off and listens to Vegeta, especially given the situation. Of course, then Vegeta begins to step forward, looking in order to take on Yamcha. Yamcha gets into his fighting stance, ready to take him on, beckoning him to come at him. But before Yamcha knew it, a fist was slammed into his gut, so powerful in fact that it completely knocked him unconscious in one blow. This shocked most of the group, as most of them weren't even able to follow such an attack, let alone even see it coming. And from that attack alone, both Goku and Krillin knew that none of these guys here, other than themselves, would be able to take on Vegeta. Even if they were to use something like Kaioken, they would still be no match for him. Goku immediately jumped into the fray, teleporting in front of Vegeta, before he could do any more damage to Yamcha, who at this point was just laid out on the ground, completely and utterly out of it, unmoving. Although he is still alive, he definitely won't be getting back up after that one. Goku looked behind him at Krillin, nodding, as a way to signal for him in order to get Yamcha out of there as the battle was about to begin. Krillin did just that by teleporting over there, grabbing Yamcha, and teleporting back to the rest of the group. Goku then turned back facing Vegeta. As the two stared each other down, Vegeta uttered to Goku, Kakarot, Do you honestly believe that you'll fare any better than your friend did against me? You saw what happened. Merely a single blow and he was already down. Goku, angered but keeping his emotions in check, then retorted, "Don't you dare mock him. He's a true warrior. You're only someone who knows how to use unfair cheap shots. For what you did to him, I'll make you pay." "Is that so? Well, see then, won't we, Kakarot?" The two ready themselves as Vegeta backs away in order to gain some distance, both getting into our iconic stances. There was a moment of silence, but eventually with the passing of a tumbleweed, the ice broke and the two charged at each other full speed. The clash of their two fists creating a massive and powerful shockwave as two began trading blow after blow, going back and forth, none overcoming the other, both seemingly to be dead even. It was a stalemate in its truest form. Punch, kick, block, parry, grapples, counters, moving at such high levels of speed that to the most of the fighters there, save for Krillin, they couldn't even be tracked. Their movements seemingly godlike, but someone had to give. And in this case, that someone was Vegeta, as he was the one to take the first strike. Goku clocking him clean across the jaw, but he quickly retaliated, grabbing onto Goku's wrist and throwing an elbow towards his face. However, Goku managed to catch this, though Vegeta was ready and throwing a side kick and catching him in the ribs. Albeit, it was clear to see that Goku's hit actually did more damage to Vegeta, as he wiped some blood from his mouth. Goku wasn't really even staggered at all. Vegeta smiled and then spoke. Well, Kakarot, I have to say I'm quite impressed by your ability. For a low class, that is. But I think that's enough of a warm-up. It's time that I show you the true power of an elite. A mountain so high that no low class could ever hope to climb over it. You were trash from birth and shall be trash, laying dead at my feet by the end of this. You're still underestimating our power. You only see me as a low class. Must be a part of something about being a Saiyan. But that arrogance will be your undoing. I'll show you that even a reject can surpass an elite, if they worked hard enough. Well, you can take that thought all the way to your grave. The two warriors clashed again, only this time it became all too obvious and clear who began to have the upper hand. More and more as the battle continued, moment by moment, minute by minute, Vegeta began to lose ground, taking on more hits and more damage. There was nothing he could do. No matter how much he tried, no matter how much he increased his power, he just couldn't overcome Goku. And like with Nappa before him, he began to get angry. But no matter how much he tried, no matter what he did, Goku would still be on top of him, blocking all of his attacks, every technique. Even when he fired off Ki Blast, they were met by either stronger Ki Blast, or Goku was able to outright block them. And as Goku landed another devastating blow straight into Vegeta's gut, he had him toppled over on the ground, bleeding profusely from his injuries, coughing up even more blood. Even Nappa was over there, just staring. He was completely awestruck. He never even knew that somebody like Vegeta could even remotely get to a point to where he was being this overpowered, this overwhelmed. As Vegeta was on his knees, buckled over, slamming his fist into the ground, damning the world, Goku then came and stood over him. See? I told you, didn't I? It doesn't matter what you look like, or where you were born, or what your race is. If you work hard enough, there is no mountain you can't climb, no limit you can't overcome. Even my friend, the one that you heard earlier, understood this. It's exactly how he got as strong as he is in the first place. But then again, people like you, born with such natural talent, so gifted, have thought they never understood this type of philosophy. And it's why, in truth, you will always remain weak and never rise above your own ability. If you can't let that pride and arrogance go, you will never overcome someone like me. Vegeta at this point was completely and utterly furious. Veins protruding from his forehead, grinding his teeth, and tightening his fist so hard his fingers began to stab into it, causing him to bleed. He then shouted, screaming with such force and anger at Goku, "Damn you!" As he rocketed off into the air, beginning to charge up his signature Gallic gun. That's it! Everyone dies! I don't give a damn about this planet anymore! I don't give a damn about you! Go ahead, Kakarot. Dodge this next attack. But when you do, your precious Earth shall be obliterated. And then we'll see where all your talk gets you. At this point, Goku could clearly see that Vegeta was completely irrational. However, thinking swiftly, he was ready to meet his challenge.
Your insolence just cost you this world! I'll blow it all to pieces, and there's nothing you can do to stop me! He's gonna what? It's hopeless! There's no way you can stop my Gatling gun!
The two warriors' blasts clashed as the very earth was being destroyed around them from the powers on display. However, it once again became all too clear that Vegeta would not win this clash, as Goku with one final push ended the beam struggle, overpowering Vegeta's Gatling gun and launching him upwards towards the sky. Once everything was settled and the dust cleared, it became quite clear who the victor of this battle was. Nappa falling to his knees, almost irate in his unwillingness to accept that Vegeta could even remotely have been defeated in such a manner, let alone killed, especially by one they consider as low-class trash. Krillin then walked towards him, not getting close enough for him to be within range of Nappa able to try something, not that anything he tried would work, but just enough so that he wouldn't have to be shouting while he was talking to him so that he can clearly understand his words. Telling Nappa that, to be fair, neither him nor Vegeta even remotely stood a chance, as this wasn't even Goku at his full power, and if he wanted to, he could have ended this battle ages ago. But instead he chose to respect Vegeta's pride as a warrior, and thus educate him on how he could improve in the future, opting the idea to Nappa that he should take Goku's advice, so that way he can better himself also, giving him a chance as he had it right now in order to be able to leave the planet. Meanwhile, up in the higher atmosphere, Vegeta managed to roll off the Kamehameha wave, although he was severely injured and badly damaged. At this point, he was nearly demoralized, hating his feeling of defeat and pain that was coursing through his body right now. This humiliation reminding him of Zarbon, Dodoria, and even Frieza, knowing them as the other ones other than Kakarot who was able to make him feel this way. Damn it! I can't believe it. My blood. My noble blood, spilled by the likes of such trash! Grr. I hate it. I hate it! No. There must be a way. I can still win. I know I could. Shit. As much as I hate using this form, I have no choice. Vegeta managed to calm himself, calming his nerves. However, the plan he would choose to enact in order to be able to secure a win wouldn't be able to happen at this point in time, given the fact that not only did all the Z fighters arrive on time and early, but the battle pretty much ended in less amount of time than it did originally. So it still would not be anywhere near close for the moon to become visible. So Vegeta opted to use his next best option, and that would be a Power Ball. Vegeta smiled, as this would not only be able to benefit him, but even somebody like Nappa. It's a good thing that he kept him alive, I guess. Vegeta came down from the sky, landing back on the ground. Everyone was a bit shocked by this, as they thought that Goku's attack had finished him off. Even Goku was a bit more surprised to see that Vegeta was a lot more intact than what he thought he should be, praising Vegeta on his durability, but also pointing out that there was no chance he even had of winning. However, Vegeta just smiled and began to snicker, calling Goku a fool, saying to him that it was a mistake not keeping his tail. Goku was shocked and taken aback by this, but moving quickly, Vegeta shouted over to Nappa to look up into the sky, as he was about to unleash a move that would secure them victory. Charging up a Power Ball, Goku immediately got into a stance ready to block it off, but then Vegeta suddenly threw it up into the air, screaming out, "Burst open and mix." Suddenly a bright light overshadowed the group, somewhat blinding them as they turned away, but not Vegeta and Nappa, both beginning to chuckle as they looked towards, their size and shape changing as they begin to grow, larger and larger still, turning into giant Osarus. Completing the transformation, Vegeta shouts to the group, "Tremble in fear. This is the end for all of you. Say goodbye!" Goku barely had any time to react as Vegeta was throwing a giant punch towards him, quickly jumping into Kaioken times 4. Still, he only barely managed to dodge it, but couldn't dodge Vegeta's next strike, as not only his power had been elevated, but his speed too. He manages to land a kick, hitting Goku hard, sending him flying through a mountain. as Nappa fired a giant brake cannon, shooting it down directly towards Chaozu and Yajirobe. Tien screams out, "No, Chaozu!" as he burst into Kaioken ×3, but unfortunately for him, he wouldn't make it in time, as both Yajirobe and Chaozu were instantly vaporized. Tien in his fury and anger charged up a big Kiko hole, and given the aspects and properties of the Kiko hole, plus being boosted by Kaioken, this was actually able, when Tien fired it, to not only knock Nappa down, but actually do a little bit of damage to him. Tien goes to try to fire another one, but instantly Vegeta appeared behind him. And with Tien off guard, he had no chance of even avoiding Vegeta's attack, as Vegeta clasped his hands around him, crushing Tien instantly, killing him in the process. But Vegeta wouldn't have any time to celebrate or relax, as Krillin in his fear and anger had thrown a bunch of Super Saiyans on Vegeta's way. However, this would be ineffectual, as Vegeta managed to dodge most of them, only getting cut across his armor and shoulder by the last one. But before he could throw an attack back at Krillin, Krillin got right in his face using a Kaioken, temporarily blinding him, allowing him, while he was in this Kaioken state, to rush over and grab up Piccolo and Yamcha, and head over to where Goku landed. As he flew away, Vegeta was screaming, shouting out, "Damn you, you pesky little bug! When I find you, Nappa, get up already! Stop sleeping on the job! It's time we finish off these cockroaches once and for all." Once Krillin reached the location, he stopped, huffing and puffing as he was using a Kaioken ×5, which was indeed putting a heavy strain on his body. Noticing that Goku was indeed here, and although he was still alive, he was currently unconscious, in the same state as Yamcha, except even more heavily injured.
Damn it. I didn't expect him to be that strong. Even at a Kaioken ×5, I'm still no match for him.
Do we happen to have any senzu beans on hand?
No, I'm sorry. They were with Yajirobe, and so...
Well, least I can say is thank you for earlier. After all, you did save my life. If it wasn't for that, I'd be just in bad a state as them. And if I go, that means Kami goes.
So, you don't have to tell me that. I already know the results. But right now, unless we can find some way to stop them, then it means we're screwed. And with both Yamcha and Goku in their current conditions, they'll be no use to us.
Wait a second. What about that ball up there in the sky?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, after all, Vegeta did summon it. Perhaps it's the source of their power. What if we take it down? Do you think that they would revert back to normal?
Yeah, it's a possibility. Let me see, I think King Kai said something about this transformation. Thinking back on it, he did tell us a little bit more about the Saiyans, and how they could transform into giant monkeys, but they needed something called blood sways, I think it was. That way it would help them transform. But I thought he said that they needed the moon or something like that. I mean, that doesn't look like no moon to me.
Perhaps not. But maybe it doesn't necessarily require the moon. Maybe it's some type of energy that it gives off. Perhaps it's emitting this energy now, in some type of form or fashion, that allows them to transform, even without the presence of a moon.
It's worth a shot to try, but maybe that's not our only option. Perhaps we'll be able to use their tails against them. I remember when I grabbed onto Raditz, it was able to immobilize him, and completely stop him from moving. Even when I grabbed onto Goku's back when we were kids, I used to use this tactic against him. But maybe not. I don't think that at our current size we'll be able to do much damage, even if we were to be able to grab onto it. And it's no guaranteed. After all, Goku did train in order to be able to overcome that weakness. So I think we'll try your idea with the whole Powerball situation. And if not, then I have one more trick up my sleeve.
It won't make it any easier with these two out of commission, but I guess I'll have to have some faith.
Heh, you changed, you know. I would have honestly never expected you to be able to help with a plan like this, especially with someone like me.
Don't get it twisted. I still aim to kill you one day. But for now, it just so happens that our goals align. Still, I guess you can thank this one. He pointed down to Yamcha, for it was him who sort of showed me a new path, a path to strength that I didn't think possible. Come to think of it, Goku's words from earlier further emphasized the point that Yamcha was trying to teach me. In fact, it reminded me of some words you said to me back at the tournament. So as much as I hate to say it, I guess I owe my growth in power and strength to you as well.
Well, guess no time to sit around here anymore. What do you say we go put down some monkeys.
I'm right behind you. The two rocketed back towards the battlefield. Nappa, being the first to spot them, quickly points out to Vegeta, before firing off another break cannon towards Krillin. However, Krillin immediately bursts into Kaioken times 5, dodging it and zooming straight for Nappa, hitting him directly into the chest, but not only hitting him, punching straight through him, blowing a giant hole within his chest. As he went through, he turned around and then did a Super Kamehameha, not only expanding the hole but completely eviscerating Nappa in the process. Vegeta roared in anger as he began to get ready to charge at Krillin, only to have a giant green fist punch him right in the face. Seeing that Piccolo had used his giantification technique in order to be able to somewhat try to measure up to Vegeta's level. However, given the fact that yes, it did indeed give Piccolo somewhat of a strength boost, it was nowhere near enough to even do remote damage to Vegeta. Vegeta easily shrugging off the blow and throwing a punch straight into Piccolo's gut. This made him cough up blood as he began to lose his giantification form, shrinking back down. But this was exactly the distraction that Krillin needed, as he had another key attack towards the Power Ball. Now, this is where some controversy is going to come in. I'm going to have the Power Ball be destroyed, but I'm also going to have Vegeta remain transformed. Now, I know that some people may end up disagreeing with it, and I myself am not too sold on the idea, as I think that the Power Ball may so act as the moon, and thus when it is destroyed, it may be possible for it to revert Vegeta back to normal, or any Great Ape for that matter. However, even during this saga, while the Power Ball was still up, Vegeta elected not to destroy it once Gohan transformed into a Great Ape. So, you know, it's a possibility, but I think I would need a bit more stronger evidence before I just concretely say that. So in this case, I'm just going to have it be destroyed, but it not be effectual against Vegeta. Hopefully you guys are a bit more okay with that, but I just think that it could work either way until I see something that kind of suggests otherwise. I mean, after all, the moon isn't the only way for Saiyan to be able to transform. In fact, these same type of blood waves or energy waves can be emitted from the Earth, as seen in GT. Although GT's not canon, this is still a type of process that could seemingly work. I mean, that's what the whole Power Ball is. In the first place, it acts as a substitute for the necessary blood waves when you don't have a moon present. That being said, let's go on and get back into this. The explosion of the Power Ball, since it was a miniaturized ki blast raining down from the sky. However, once the smoke and light dissipated, Krillin still saw that Vegeta was there. Not only was he still transformed, but it had no effect on him at all. In fact, Vegeta began to chuckle and laugh, surprised that Krillin actually believed that would work. This was absolutely devastating to Krillin, as for the first time in a long time, he felt completely hopeless, until he didn't remember that he had one more trick up his sleeve, but even in that moment, he didn't think that it had any chance. Still being utterly devastated, given as the fact that technique would need time in order to be able to work properly. At the most of what he could do was maybe push his body. After all, he had been training with his Kaioken for the past year, and even though he had elevated its levels, he still was completely unsure as to whether or not he could push it to the level that he needed to in order to be able to become Vegeta. If he could just manage to get it up to a times 6 at least, he would then have the power necessary in order to be able to overcome Vegeta. However, at this point, he was feeling the burn, the overwhelming amount of exhaustion overcoming his body, because once again he had been using a Kaioken times 5 at this point, which was still putting a significant amount of strain onto him. To push it even further, that was suicide, he thought to himself. But at this point, he really had no other options. Nevertheless, both of the things that he could think of would take time in order to be able to activate. Using the instant transmission, he teleports down to where Piccolo is after locating his energy, grabbing onto him and teleporting away from Vegeta's sight. Given the devastation of the battlefield, there were still many things that they could use to hide behind. Piccolo was indeed still conscious, but he was also badly injured. Krillin informing him that their strategy didn't work, and that he did have at least 2 more things that he could possibly use, but both of them would take time in order for him to be able to activate and use them properly. He first told Piccolo about the fact that he could potentially push his Kaioken up to the next level, which would give him the power in order to be able to overcome Vegeta with one attack. However, this would probably end up killing him in the process. He then told Piccolo about the Spirit Bomb, and how he was sure that this would be a surefire kill on Vegeta, but that the amount of time it would take to gather enough energy would in turn give Vegeta more than enough time in order to be able to kill him. So he suggested to Piccolo that they end up going with the first option, given the fact that charging up his Kaioken would take a significantly less amount of time than it would have to charge a Spirit Bomb, asking Piccolo that if he could use Giantification for just one more time, he could catch Vegeta off guard to where he would be able to deliver this attack upon him. However, he did let Piccolo know that it would most likely end up in his death. Of course, Piccolo ended up laughing this off, as at this point he didn't even really care. He just really wanted to beat this guy, no matter what it took, even if that meant sacrificing himself. He was glad to lay down his life for this cause. However, their time for resting swiftly came to an end as Vegeta grew tired of the game of hide and seek and just began blasting the whole entire area. Acting quickly, Krillin managed to grab Piccolo and get them out of the way, but try as they might, they weren't able to find any cover, as Krillin had to focus and put all of his energy on keeping them from getting hit, knowing that it would mean the death of them if any one of these attacks were to touch them. But as time went on, it slowly became clear that Krillin wasn't going to be able to dodge forever. All hope seemed lost until he heard a familiar voice and an attack scream out, "Sokidan!" and "Kamehameha!" Both attacks slammed dead into Vegeta, grabbing his attention. As he turned it towards, we end up seeing both Goku and Yamcha as they're staring Vegeta down, breathing heavily. Vegeta growls angrily in a low tone, as Krillin just looks up in excitement, happy to see that both his friends are okay and that they've come back to help aid him in the final stretch of this battle. Goku and Yamcha immediately started shooting out large volleys of ki blasts at Vegeta in order to be able to keep him distracted so that way Krillin can get away. Vegeta, although annoyed, wasn't really taking all that much damage. Over time, it did start to build up, but as he was blocking, he did end up noticing that Krillin, while carrying Piccolo, was flying off into the other direction in order to be able to get away. Out of the corner of his eye, using his peripheral vision, he fired off a large ki blast with his other hand, while he used one to maintain blocking the ki volleys that were being shot off by both Goku and Yamcha. This energy blast came hurtling at breakneck speeds towards Krillin and Piccolo, catching Krillin by surprise as he wasn't expecting it. Turning around looking behind him, he looked upon what he thought would be both of their deaths, as he felt there was no way he'd be able to dodge in time, given just how fast the blast was moving towards him. But at the last moment, Piccolo ended up making the ultimate sacrifice, breaking away from Krillin's grip and pushing him off to the side, getting him out of the range of the blast, but taking it on full force, as he was completely incinerated. Immediately, both Goku and Yamcha stopped firing their energy volleys, and Yamcha, with tears in his eyes, flew into a rage, his power flaring up as he shouted out Kaioken ×2, charging up a Kamehameha wave, images of the time he spent with Piccolo in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber flashing through his eyes. Goku, feeding off of Yamcha's passion, charged himself up to a Kaioken ×5, and also charged up a Kamehameha wave. Both of them fired the dual Kamehameha wave blast straight towards Vegeta, Vegeta firing his own mouth blast in order to be able to counter them. A beam struggle ended up happening as the two parties clashed against each other. Krillin managed to get a hold of his bearings and landed on the ground. He took the time to raise his hands up in the air and begin charging up for the Spirit Bomb. "I beg you, oceans, people, animals, vast lands of the earth, please lend me your energy." As Krillin began to gather energy for the Spirit Bomb, we transfer back over to the beam clash between Vegeta, Goku, and Yamcha. It was clearly being shown that Vegeta began to overpower the two. Try as they might, they weren't able to muster up enough strength. However, Yamcha started thinking about Piccolo, the loss that he has suffered, truly even starting to consider Piccolo a friend, a comrade who had just started to change his ways. And even though he knew that it was probably suicide, and most likely lead to his death, he charged up, powering up to Kaioken ×3. Immediately his muscles bulged. The evidence of the damage was clear, as his blood vessels began to pop. Blood was leaking from his eyes, his nose, and even his ears. Goku, not wanting to be the one to end up holding the group back, and seeing the condition of Yamcha, further increased his power as well, to a Kaioken ×6. And where this helped a little, they were able to push the blast back towards Vegeta somewhat, but still, nevertheless, Vegeta persisted, further increasing his power and pushing the two back again. Only this time, Yamcha couldn't hold out anymore, telling Goku that he was sorry, as he let go, and he fell to the ground, dead. Goku shouted in anger, telling them that his sacrifice would not be in vain, and that no matter what, he could not and would not lose this fight, pushing himself up even further as his muscles began to expand and his body began to break down on him. He didn't care. It didn't matter what he had to do. He pushed and he pushed, even raising his power up to its absolute limit. Kaioken ×7. Even Vegeta felt the pushback on that one, as he had been burning through his reserves of power as well. Even if he thought that he could still win this battle, he wouldn't be leaving it unscathed. And with this, it was a stalemate, a dead even draw. Although even though Goku was pushing with everything he had in all his might, there was still more depths of power that Vegeta could add into. He still had a bit more reserves, and slowly but surely began to push it back. However, he wouldn't be able to overcome Goku in time, as a glowing light began to illuminate behind him, grabbing his attention, as he heard in a fiery voice, "Enough! Take this! Spirit Bomb!" Vegeta couldn't do anything. He couldn't even react, as the bomb immediately hit him, blasting him off high up into the air. Only the screams of agony could be heard, as he was covered in a blinding light. And as the light began to dissipate, Goku finally put his arms down, falling to one knee. It's over. Thank you, my friends. He wasn't in pretty bad shape, but for all intents and purposes, he was still very much alive. Krillin now teleporting over to his side, helping him back over to his feet, as Goku could barely even stand, and definitely would not be able to fight anymore. I'm sorry, Goku. If only I just wasn't strong enough to. Hey, what are you talking about? If it wasn't for you, we'd be dead right now. Look, I understand about the sacrifice that was made here today, but trust me, in the end it was worth it. This was the least we could do for them, to protect the people of the Earth, and the planet itself. But as the two lament over the battle, Krillin looked up towards the sky, only noticed something was falling from it. Eventually, as it became more visible, he noticed that it was Vegeta. However, he was de-transformed and back into his base state now, hitting the ground, causing a small explosion and creating a crater as he did. Now, I know that some of you are expecting Vegeta to actually have died in this incident, but I'm going to be keeping him alive for a couple of reasons here. One, even though there's no loss of energy with the Spirit Bomb, and Vegeta does take on the full brunt of it, unlike in the original, where Vegeta had blasted Goku after he had finished creating the Spirit Bomb, thus losing a significant portion of its power. I don't think it necessarily changes all too much, whereas if it was in Vegeta's base state, most likely he would have been vaporized and murdered. But however, given the fact that he was in his Great Ape state with heightened power and ability, I'd say that there's a strong chance that he definitely would have been able to survive this. And given the fact that Krillin is also weaker, not than he was originally, but definitely still weaker than Vegeta. So due to the fact that he's transformed into a giant ape, I think that there's a better chance for him to be able to survive even if he was hit at full power. So again, this more so still falls back on his dexterity, whereas with the giant ape, I think he has enough power backing him up to where it necessarily wouldn't be able to kill him due to him being in that form and being at a higher elevated set of power, and that even if it was able to affect him, that I still think that he is durable enough and has the ability to endure such a level of attack, and in fact he'd still be around kicking. However, there are still some caveats to this, given the fact that Krillin is significantly stronger than he was originally or in the original timeline. I'm going to sit here and say that Vegeta is as crippled as he was after Gohan fell on him. So yeah, Vegeta is still going to be out of commission. It's not like he's going to get back up and, fight them. I still think that he would be able to survive this. After a few moments, Vegeta's body began to stir. As his eyes opened, he looked around to see that nobody was in his immediate vicinity. Barely able to move, he struggled, reaching a device in his pocket. For Vegeta had his pride, but he wasn't stupid. Knowing that he could no longer fight, he took this to be his best opportunity in an attempt to escape, calling over his space pod. As it flew over there, coming down, Goku and Krillin saw this, but neither of them had the energy or power to even do anything about it. As it comes down, landing in front of Vegeta, he barely manages to crawl inside of it before it closes, taking off back towards space, leaving both Goku and Krillin to stand there onlooking as he flew away. And to all my Gummy Knights, new and old, just remember, this is a man's world, but it would be nothing without his brain and his bronze. And lying is indeed the most fun that a woman can have without taking off her clothes. Good night.
Swear to stick it up in you, suddenly I sit over still so young, desperate for attention, I aim to be your eyes, trophy boys, trophy wives. Applause, applause, no wait, dear studio audience, I've an announcement to make. It seems the artists these days are not who you think, so we'll pick back up on that on another page.